Good evening, everyone. My name is Councillor Morley. We're just going to give it a quick 30 seconds here, but we're very excited to host you all this evening on our virtual information session. We're going to be chatting about the Bloor West Complete Street project. We've got some wonderful experts and guests who are going to take us through the information tonight. So again, my name is Councillor Morley, Deputy Mayor for Etobicoke. I'm joined by some of my team members, Samantha, Tanisha, Usley, and Lisa are all on the call tonight, helping troubleshoot behind the scenes. And I just want to thank all of the participants who are joining us on this evening's conversation for your engagement in advance and the questions that you've submitted for us to go through. So we're joined today by Adam Popper, who's a Senior Project Manager with the City of Toronto. We have Alyssa Serbu with us, who's a Senior Coordinator in Public Consultation, and Jacqueline Hayward, who is a Director of Planning, Design and Management in Transportation Services at the City of Toronto. So we are just flagging this session is being recorded for your information. Because of the setup, no one's information should be publicly available as we have it in panelist mode, so not to worry, but we did want to share that information with you, and we will make the recording available after this session as well. As we do, as the City of Toronto, we like to acknowledge the land that we are virtually meeting on today. We acknowledge the land is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. It's also Black History Month, folks, so happy Black History Month. I hope everyone is filling their schedule with events to acknowledge and to celebrate this important month. And with that, we will also do the African Ancestral Acknowledgement. The City of Toronto acknowledges all treaty peoples, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past. And those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. Thank you so much. So as we mentioned, we've just done the introductions. Again, I'm Amber. I will be your host and moderator here this evening. We will have a brief presentation that Adam, Alyssa, and Jacqueline will take us through to cover the project overview. We will then get into a moderated panel, which will be looking into some of the questions that you all have submitted to us in advance, and then we'll dive into closing remarks and next steps. So we got 239 questions in advance of tonight's town hall information session. So you can see here what some of the content of those questions were. Many general interest, many, 44 specific to the project timeline and what's next, and some of the other moderated questions that we're going to dive into together after we get a brief overview. So you can take a peek at those there. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Adam, Alyssa, and Jacqueline to take us through an overview of the project to date.
Thank you, Councillor. Thanks, everyone, for joining us tonight. We're thrilled to be with you and look forward to answering your questions tonight and any other questions that you have. So, project overview, the Bloor West Complete Street extension aims to make travel safer, more inviting, and attractive for everyone. So this is a 4.6 kilometer project that has been approved by Toronto City Council, and it's City Council that gives staff the authority to design, do consultation, and install these projects. So some of this content may be familiar to those of you who came to the public consultation and were involved throughout the project. The project goals fit into 4 categories. They're to improve safety for really everyone, people walking especially, cycling and driving. We're also looking to enhance the walking and cycling experience. And one way of doing that is to support the qualities that make Bloor Street West a place. So it's not just something to move through, but it's a place in and of itself, as well as to maintain roadway space for transit, emergency services, deliveries, shopping, and commuting. So this project is built on a foundation of policies that are also approved by Toronto City Council. For example, the Toronto official plan, and it has a variety of goals, some of which are related to transportation, including making Toronto a walking city and bringing all Torontonians within a kilometer of a designated cycling route. The Road to Health is an important document that helps us understand the connection between physical activity and the associated risks of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, as well as some cancers when physical activity isn't a part of people's everyday lives. Transform TO is the climate action strategy. The target there is to bring 75% of school or work trips under 5 kilometers by walk, bicycle, or transit by 2030. An ambitious goal, and projects like this contribute to doing so. We're also supported by the Vision Zero Road Safety Plan, and I'll speak a bit more about that vision, as well as the Complete Streets guidelines. So the Complete Streets approach is about thinking about streets as more than just places to move through. In the past, we've looked at streets as, auto mobility focused. You really look at the center line of the street and you say, okay, this is the most important thing, and everything else outside falls from that. In the Complete Streets approach, we think about context first and foremost. Bloor, as you know, goes through a variety of neighborhoods, right through downtown, through really important and beautiful parts of Etobicoke. And so that context is fundamental. We look at multi-mobility, we look at public health objectives, we look at environmental quality, the livability, and equity when we think about the design of streets. So we take an outside-in approach. The Complete Streets are based on 3 broad principles: streets for people, streets for placemaking, and streets for prosperity. So how does that actually play out on our streets and on streets like Bloor? When it comes to prosperity, it means working with BIAs, working with the CafeTO program, and creating loading and parking opportunities. Placemaking is about public art. It's about places to sit. It's about making the street more than just a place to move through, but a place in and of itself. And Streets for People is about universal accessibility. It's about safety. And it's about making those connections between walking and transit and all the other ways that people move on our streets. The Vision Zero approach, it's based on an action plan in Toronto and similar ones right across the planet. The idea here is that we want to bring traffic fatalities and serious injuries down to zero. In the past, we thought of traffic fatalities as inevitable. We see them now as preventable. We look at previously trying to reduce all road collisions. Now we want to prevent those collisions because we believe that no serious injury or loss of life is acceptable. Rather than being reactive, we take a systemic approach, applying best practices, applying context, and be more proactive. So a point here is about lowering speeds. This is fundamental to Vision Zero and about creating places on our streets. So this isn't just about lowering speed limits. It's about lowering the design speed of the street. So what does that mean? It means making it feel like when you're driving that you're going at the appropriate pace for a street. So we can do that with lane widths, with the number of lanes, as well as with the context, like the buildings and trees and so forth that frame the street. And what we find is that when speeds are lower, drivers have, they stop more quickly, their reaction time takes less time, and when those collisions unfortunately still do occur, there's a lower chance of death when speeds are lower. And so the fundamental design goal of lowering speeds saves lives. We have many, many streets in Toronto. Most of them, and the most kilometers, are local streets. We also have a few expressways and collectors. But what we find is that the number of fatal collisions tends towards the arterial roads, like Bloor, like many of the major roads in our downtown area, as well as in the suburban communities. And so we target many of our Vision Zero interventions on those arterial roads so that we can be strategic and ultimately save as many lives and prevent as many serious injuries as we can. So bringing that home to Bloor, as part of the consultation, you may remember some of these slides, but it takes a deeper dive into the 20 collisions that involved fatalities or serious injuries along the corridor, looked at some of the places where they were most concentrated and the trends over time. So we look at all these collisions and their details when we get into the detailed design to see if there are trends that can be avoided through a redesign. But it also helps us provide a baseline so we can measure against it over the years to come. And then, for example, those 20 collisions, we look at who was involved, how did they come about? So 45% were pedestrian collisions, 10% were involving people cycling. And so that means in this case, vulnerable road users who include pedestrians, school-aged children, older adults, as well as people cycling and motorcyclists, make up 55% of the collisions resulting in the killed or seriously injured on this part of Bloor Street West. We also looked at mode share, and one of the important things to remember is that Bloor has a wonderful transit service that rides pretty much right underneath. And so, yes, the street carries many, many vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists before installation. But the vast majority of people traveling along this corridor do so by transit. So this means that street space can potentially be repurposed for other uses and to achieve some of the Vision Zero and Complete Streets objectives. So many of you have asked, what's the project timeline, what's coming up? So I'm going to do a quick recap of what happened in 2023. Preliminary design began in 2022 and consultation with businesses and key interest groups in the early part of 2023. In March and April, we sent a notice to almost 34,000 residents, had 2 in-person consultation events, an online survey, and several meetings with other interest groups before then. In May and June, this project was considered by Toronto City Council, and before that, its Infrastructure and Environment Committee. And we heard deputations from members of the public and stakeholders on this topic. It was ultimately approved by Toronto City Council, which gave staff basically our marching orders to install the project. Installation commenced at the earliest opportunity in September with the reconfiguration of the roadway and the subsequent installation of other elements such as curbs, bollards, and detailed pavement markings. In December, we paused installation because it is difficult and in some cases impossible to install pavement markings that will actually adhere to the roadway during that time. And so we will recommence in the spring. So what to expect? In the spring, we'll complete phase 1 installation and do some adjustments. I'll go over those in detail. Phase 2, Aberfoyle Crescent to Resurrection Road will be installed. Traffic signal modifications and retiming for safety and efficiency. So this is right along the corridor, starting with phase 1 and then subsequently phase 2 after its initial install. We'll also be conducting counts and coordinating with CafeTO installations. Over the summer and fall, we'll be upgrading some, and I'll speak about this more, some intersections to increase parking, straighten the bikeway, improve placemaking, and in one location, adding a sidewalk where it's missing. We'll also be continuously updating our website. So those of you who are here tonight, I'm sure are interested in the project. A lot of information already exists there, and that's going to be a continual update. So please continue to check back there as the project unfolds. And in the fall, we're looking to meet again with the public about the difficult intersection of South Kingsway, Mossam Road, and Riverview Gardens. It's not in Councillor Morley's ward, but it is a really important part of this community, of the neighborhood, and of how people move in and around through various modes. And so to untie that knot and figure out what the long-term vision is for it, we want to meet again with the public on some long-term options. So some upgrades and adjustments, some details on that. Traffic signals, we're looking to modify certain intersections for safety and efficiency. So for example, this is adding certain protected movements. That means where there's a protected right turn signal or a left turn signal that separates it from other movements. So adding green time. And then for all of the phase 1 signals, we'll be retiming them, again, for safety and efficiency. And so a lot of you have asked, how do we retime the signals so that more time goes to the east-west along Bloor, where there has been some delay and congestion? One of the key objectives of the retiming is to provide more time to the east-west where feasible. Phase 2 is now under investigation for the exact same process as we're planning to install for phase 1. So traffic signal modification and retiming. Many of you have seen the ZICLA platforms. That's in the center of that photo, a black and yellow and white raised platform. It has a variety of purposes. It's mostly used at bus stops, and this makes it more accessible for people to reach the bus. It also permits more parkings, and it prevents the bus from having to pull to the curb. So this allows for a safer situation between buses as well as people cycling. And because buses are able to go straighter, there's more opportunity to extend the parking bays where those intersect with bus stops, as well as continue the protection of people cycling. And this makes people feel safer and ultimately achieves the project goals. We also use them for accessible and commercial loading. So you'll see those even not at bus stops along phase 1, and more are planned in phase 2. Some other, quickly, you've seen some decorative curb extensions. More are planned in the BIAs in conjunction with their input. Some of the green paint that helps clarify the roles and responsibilities of various road users will be put out at the earliest possibility. I mentioned CafeTO installation, and we can speak to that a little bit later, but ultimately, as cafes, as businesses submit for CafeTO permits, they will be referred to us, and we will look closely with the CafeTO team to make sure that as many as are feasible can be installed and the road reconfigured into a summer conversion versus where it is now in its winter format. So today, right now we do not have physical separation on the 2 bridges. What's planned is toward the end of this year will be physical separation that is covered in paint through an artistic program also run by some of our colleagues in transportation services. So you may have seen many of the murals around the city, as well as on Scarlet Road. There's some painted barriers similar to this. And so this is a wonderful Street Art Toronto collaboration. We're also looking to add the missing sidewalk. So you see on the left photo today, there's people are walking on what is essentially a painted sidewalk. What we're looking to do is physically build that out with a proper sidewalk that is accessible for people of all ages and abilities who want to walk on that side of the street. So here's a concept that we're working on for Grenview Boulevard as one example, but we're doing many similar interventions elsewhere. What you see here is a top-down view of Grenview going vertically and Bloor going across the screen. What's red is what will be the future. And so, Tanisha, if you could please click the next slide, you'll see that one of the things we're trying to do is physically raise the crosswalk for pedestrians. This makes them more visible to drivers. It also forces drivers to slow and go up to the pedestrian level and then back down. So it's basically a speed hump meets a crosswalk. The other thing this does is it keeps people's feet dry in the winter when there's puddles. So it's not just about safety, though that's the core reason, but there's also a convenience factor as well. We're also looking to improve in-ground planters, so providing green infrastructure wherever we can. And this also is in an attempt to straighten out the bike lane. Through the Kingsway and the Bloor West Village, there have been installed bump outs to create more space for pedestrians. We're proposing to put that slightly more on the side street, straighten the path, and thus create more parking space. So where that's feasible, we'll add it. And then we're also looking to work with the BIAs to improve public space, benches, planters, street furniture, again, where space permits. So that's just one example. And when we do this, we take the opportunity to add, to improve the curb radius. So this is to slow turning drivers, shorten the pedestrian crossings, and make people more visible. Here's an example of that. Phase 2 will also be installed. This is on our public website, and we'll be posting the final plans as well, so people can see what the actual intersections will look like, how vehicles and pedestrians and cyclists will interact on the street. Some questions were raised about what the future of cycling is in the neighborhood beyond the Bloor project. Currently, in the 2022 to 2024 implementation plan, there is no extension planned for Bloor beyond 6 points west of Kipling Avenue. And so we do know, however, that the Dundas Street West dotted line at the top of the map there was originally planned for study in this phase of the cycling network plan. It is now planned for study in 2025 to 2027 to better coordinate with the water main replacement and road work, which is currently planned for construction in 2028. Many of you have asked about project costs. The installation of phase 1 was approved by Toronto City Council, and the process for awarding a contract followed all of City Council's procurement and cost control bylaws and policies. The initial contract was valued at just over $3 million net of all taxes, and the total project budget to date is estimated to be $4.5 million. Back to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Adam. I really appreciate you taking us through those details. And for the work that your team have been doing on an ongoing basis. I know you're hearing a lot from us, and we appreciate your engagement both with our office and with the wider community. So we're going to get into questions. As mentioned, as we've seen, we have questions asked by 159 people. We've got about 150 people, I believe, on the call tonight. And unfortunately, we won't get to all the questions that folks have posed, but we have tried to group them together to really make sure that the information most sought after is discussed here tonight. So if we could have the next slide, we're going to get into project measurement. This is something that I think we all are very focused on. We know that this is a new offering to our community. Traditionally, people don't always ride bikes through this part of the neighborhood. And so how we continue to monitor and look at that is really critical. What measures before the project was installed were in place, and what measurements are planned for after installation, including what data and studies will be shared publicly. So Adam, whomever on the team you'd like to take that question, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I want to acknowledge there's a large team of staff who support this project, and especially the measurement, monitoring, and reporting is a complicated piece of work, and it's important to acknowledge that there's a lot of dedicated and hardworking staff to support it. So I'll take you through 3 slides quickly. Uh, Before the project, we conducted dozens of site visits, observed travel behavior at key signalized intersections, especially during the rush hour, like the one you see here at Royal York. We reviewed the safety data. We conducted 25 new multimodal counts in May of 2022, and dozens more that were compared to pre-COVID, based on some feedback from technical stakeholders, as well as many members of the public who said, you know, I'm concerned that there may be some off-street diversion of traffic. Please make sure that you have counts here. You know, we use that feedback to inform further data collection. So we conducted 17 additional counts in 2023 and conducted 4 motor vehicle speed and volume counts. And so I just want to acknowledge that for those people who are interested in getting granular about the data, Transportation Services is committed to transparent data sharing, and you can download this data on Open Toronto, open.toronto.ca, but we will also be releasing public-friendly dashboards that's a summary of the data that makes it easier for people to digest. So during the installation timeline, we conducted dozens of site visits again, you know, always observing travel behavior, learning about the project as we install, and adjusting the design based on feedback. Also, in December of last year, we installed 4 multimodal counters that are permanent at the 4 intersections listed below. So only Islington will be considered a before count, but what these allow us to do is monitor the project as it takes its shape over time. So that's Jane, the Kingsway, and Royal York. After the project, we will monitor and report on the project. We'll continue to conduct site visits and observe travel behavior. We plan to recount at several of the intersections, again, looking at May as the month, so we compare apples to apples. And we continue to receive and respond to feedback, including potential design adjustments. So what we've done for other projects, we plan to do here as well, and that's to release project update PDFs and dashboards that will have a plethora of information. At the earliest, you know, we're talking about late winter for the first project information update. It will have a limited amount of data because May is going to be a big moment in the project for data collection, but you'll still see something come out soon, especially focused on vehicle travel times. As we release more information, vehicle speeds, pedestrian cycling and driving volumes, as well as we have on other projects, summaries from Toronto Fire Services, Toronto Paramedic Services, and traffic volumes on nearby streets. So if you go to toronto.ca/ that should say Bloor West, you'll find more information about that as it unfolds.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Adam. The next question we have to dig into here is how can we improve the traffic flow and congestion? You did cover a little bit of that in the overview of the project, but are there additional opportunities to change signal timing to improve this as we go along? And can you dig into that a little bit more for us?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, ultimately, the answer is yes. We are looking not to create congestion, but to alleviate it. It's one of the goals of transportation services generally to make travel more convenient and safer for everyone. We are looking to do so from a multimodal perspective. And one of the ways we can do that is by retiming traffic signals. So what does this mean? This means coordinating the signals so that they have the same cycle length, so that when you're driving at the design speed, in this case 40 kilometers an hour, you'll be able to move through multiple signals at once. We're also looking to reduce delay at intersections. So where there are many more vehicles than there are seconds in the minute, for us to allocate green time, we try to rebalance that as much as possible. So that means in some cases, taking a few seconds away from the north-south and giving it to the east-west. I want to acknowledge, however, there's limitations in that process. For example, at Royal York, where there's a lot of demand from both the east-west and the north-south is especially important to the TTC because if Royal York gets backed up, they won't be able to get their buses in and out of the station. And so we work closely with Toronto Fire Services, with traffic signal operations experts in this field, as well as the TTC, who look in very great depth on our traffic signal models to make sure that we're moving everyone and balancing all the objectives on the project.
Thank you, Adam. And I just wanted to take the opportunity as well to provide a little bit more context for folks listening to what we're navigating as a city. And I'm thinking about a project that I did as a staffer with in Etobicoke Centre, further up on Royal York, and learning about the additional volume of cars that have been on Royal York regularly in the last couple of years. So it's important to note Etobicoke Lakeshore is one of the fastest growing wards in the city of Toronto. We've grown by more than 24,000 residents in the past 10 years, and there are roughly 67,600 new units in the development pipeline just in our ward. 15,800 of which have first planning approval. So, shovels will be in the ground before we know it if they aren't already. It's also important to note that just along Bloor, we have thousands of new units proposed, and we also are navigating a provincial mandate to build density around major transit stations. So Kipling is a major transit station. Islington is another really important station, and all of Bloor, frankly, is along a really important subway line. So density and focus on additional building through our planning department is going to continue to happen here. And as was highlighted earlier in the presentation, it's really critical that these new residents have accessible and ideally active modes of transit to safely move through the city. And ideally, right, not in cars because there's just not enough space on the road for everybody once we continue to grow, at the level that we are anticipating. So thank you for that. We're going to move to the next question. And so the next question that residents want to know is how can we reduce the number of non-local drivers taking neighborhood streets? So we often hear about concerns related to cut-through traffic, which are very real. So how are we monitoring the impact of the neighborhood streets? Did we consider installing bike lanes on residential streets previously instead of along Bloor? And can you talk us through sort of the rationale?
Sure. Thank you for that question. So non-local driving on neighborhood streets, as I mentioned earlier, we received feedback on where people believed there would be cut-through routes. We've also looked at the network ourselves and said, well, maybe people might be cutting through or looking at parallel driving on some neighborhood streets. And so we put those in our count program. Since then, we've received other requests, some of which we do have before data on, some of which we don't, but for the majority we do. And so we'll be continuing to collect that data after install. Again, this is mostly going to happen in May. And receiving feedback from you, that's going to be an ongoing piece, and we look forward to reviewing those because that informs what we do on a data analysis aspect as well. We'll analyze this data and make recommendations as necessary, especially if there is an increase on neighborhood streets. Our options, for example, are to add turn or through restrictions. Here's an example on the screen from Barton Avenue and Christie Street. When the initial Bloor bike lanes were installed, there was some concern that people in the morning were diverting from some traffic on Bloor and trying to cut through on Barton, which does go for several blocks parallel to Bloor just north. And so we installed a through restriction in the AM period, that is the rush hour period. And so now we find more people, turning rather than going through at this intersection. The other things we can do, and again, it's on a case-by-case basis, install traffic calming to reduce speeds on streets, as well as deter the cut-throughs, because if people aren't able to travel as quickly, they'll stick to other major routes, which is where, inter-neighborhood traffic best belongs. And then as required based on these options, we'll report and approve and seek council approval or the correct body if it's a community council. And once that approval is sought and achieved, installation would occur. So this takes time, but we want to be methodical and do it transparently and with the community and the councillor's office.
I would just jump in to say, Adam, that we are very aware of community concerns about traffic and speeds on local streets, particularly around schools and where communities are walking. Many of the streets in the neighborhood don't have sidewalks. And ensuring that there's safety on those streets is utmost important to us as well. The traffic calming policy, for example, was recently approved as an update by City Council to make it easier to implement various traffic calming methods. So those of you who may have engaged with local councillors before about opportunities for traffic calming may have had a hard time seeing those come to fruition, but those traffic calming policies are a little bit easier to navigate and for councillors to bring forward where that's the recommended option. So that wanted to add that in as well.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I was going to highlight that as well, so thank you for beating me to it.
Thank you, Jacqueline, and thank you, Councillor. So one of the questions was, did we consider other routes? And I think the answer is yes. And probably the best way to answer that is, well, why was Bloor selected? Why is Bloor in the cycling network plan at all? Why is it prioritized in this phase of the cycling network plan? So we have our existing cycling network. This you can get from a map at your local bike shop. Next slide. So the cycling network has 3 goals, and those are to connect, grow, and renew the cycling network. Each of our projects fits within these 3 goals, some of them all 3, some 1 or 2. Renew is really for when there's other road work that's happening, maybe there's a major road reconstruction. We'll take that opportunity to upgrade cycling facilities if it's called for. This project fits more closely in the connecting of gaps and growing the cycling network to new parts of the city. So there's 3 elements or aspects of the cycling network that are connected. There's the long-term vision, the major citywide cycling routes, and the 3-year near-term plan. So what goes into the long-term vision? How are streets assessed and scored and prioritized? So here's a map. You can't really see it very clearly, but there's a suitability score where the highest routes are dark red, then orange, then yellow, and blue. And what makes it so is a multi-criteria cycling impact analysis. So I'm going to break down this analysis for you so you can see how Bloor scored highly. So safety, for example, is there a history of collision or concern? In the bottom right, you see the number of traffic fatalities by district, and Scarborough, unfortunately, has the highest, but then Etobicoke right after that at 2.44 per 100,000 residents. And so safety at a granular level contributes, on a street-by-street basis to where we put cycling infrastructure or plan it. Equity is about neighborhoods that are underserved by transportation options. That's another piece that goes into how we prioritize routes. How many people are currently cycling? So we know that at street level, approximately 0.3% prior to install were cycling along Bloor compared to other modes. And some people have said, well, that's not a lot. Why are you prioritizing cycling? That is one factor that contributes to how we prioritize. Another one is, what is the potential cycling demand? So how many people are making trips frequently between 1 and 5 kilometers using other transportation modes? So these are trips that could be replaced by a cycling trip, which are typically under 5K. Connectivity is a big piece and one that definitely applies to the Complete Street project that we're talking about today. The network coverage, so is this bikeway being considered? Is it where there are not currently a lot of cycling options? This harkens back to the official plan goal to bring bikeways within 1 kilometer of all residences. Trip generators, are there many trip generators around and on the route? So, you know, Bloor is a wonderful place. It goes through 2 very busy commercial areas. Those add to the trip generators where people want to go and people want to start from. Transit access, it scores highly again because of the bus routes, but most importantly, the transit, the high volume transit in the GO train stations and especially the TTC subways. Many of the neighborhood streets around not only don't connect with each other beyond a few blocks, but they also don't cross 2 of the major barriers that Bloor does cross, which are the Mimico Creek and the Humber River. So the other goal is to create a major citywide cycling network. Think of these as sort of the highways of the cycling world. City Council approved in 2019 an overall structure for the cycling network plan and sought to build 500 kilometers of these major citywide routes, and Bloor is one of them. And then the highest priority ones make their way into the nearest term cycling network implementation program. So right now we're in the 22 to 24 near-term program. At the end of last year, some of my colleagues consulted the public on what should the next phase be. So we bring some of these analysis topics to the public and say, did we get it right? Are these the right routes? What else should we consider? And that plan will be brought to council in the coming months. So here we find ourselves on Bloor and this particular project, and it was nominated as part of that plan, the 2022 to 24 plan that was endorsed by council in December 2021. So broadly speaking, why do we build a cycling network? Well, one reason is that cycling increases over time as we add bikeways. For example, the original Bloor Street bike lane showed that after installation, 56% of more people were cycling than before it was installed. This trend applied to the extension between Shaw Street and Runnymede Road. Behavior change takes time, you know, it doesn't happen immediately. As the network is built out and further connections are made, more people find reasons to ride bikes and are able to connect using that network. They also provide benefits to other road users. So people walking feel safer because they're further away from fast motor vehicles in many situations. We also have learned that by installing bikeways, we decrease speeding, people driving, and reduce the severity of collisions. So again, looking at the Bloor Street bike lanes, the same number of vehicle-bicycle collisions occurred, but there were many, many more people cycling after than before, which shows that there was a reduced collision rate. We also took surveys of people, intercept surveys of people arriving in a variety of modes on Bloor, and found that everyone felt safer. Motorists felt safer because cyclists weren't weaving in and out, and they were more able to predict where cyclists were going to be. Cyclists felt safer after than before, and pedestrians as well.
Hi, folks. Thank you, Adam. managing technical difficulties around here. So I'm not sure if you can see me. I'm on a different screen at the moment, but we're going to keep on rolling. I'm very mindful of time and appreciate everyone for joining us tonight. So we're going to keep it tight and try to troubleshoot back here. So the next question is related to feedback. Of course, these really important engagement sessions are all about sharing, receiving feedback, but also understanding how it is shaping the project. So can you talk to us, Adam and team, about how feedback has shaped the project before approval and since installation? We are specifically curious, residents want to know what consultation was done before the project and how the project has changed in response to the feedback. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor. So consultation is a critical part of all of the cycling and pedestrian projects. Specifically, we meet with residents and businesses to understand their priorities in a project, any specific design specifications or uses that we would need to factor into the design. So I'll start off with the communications that were undertaken to let people know that the project was going through this consultation process. So first off, we always send out a notice that notifies people of consultation activities, so notifies them of ways to participate and provide this feedback that would then shape the design of the project. This specific area, I think Adam mentioned, included about 33,000 addresses. I've included a map as well and the project boundaries. This same area was also the same area that was mailed the construction notice. So this was after the project was approved. We also sent an additional notice to let people know that the project was approved and specific details about construction. In addition, we had project email lists and stakeholder lists that were notified about the project. We also posted on social media, and there's a summary of engagement at the bottom of the slide. Next. So as far as consultation activities, I'll go kind of in order here. So the first thing we wanted to understand is business delivery and loading needs. Specifically, Bloor is a major commercial corridor with a wide variety of businesses on there. And so we sent this survey out to the various businesses and addresses and collected about 72 responses, which shaped initial design specifications. We also hosted individual stakeholder meetings with a variety of business improvement areas or BIAs, various businesses that we identified as having specific challenges, concerns, or feedback that they needed to share with us, as well as various residents associations and ratepayer groups. So I've listed the individuals who we met with, but some of those we met with several times throughout that process. We also invited all of these stakeholders out to a stakeholder meeting. They were presented the exact same information that was shared with the public, and we had about 26 attendees from a variety of organizations at that meeting. In addition, hopefully a few of you or a bunch of you who are joining this call were able to join our public drop-in events. So those were held in mid-April. There were two events, one at, I believe, Swansea Junior Senior Public School, as well as at Etobicoke Collegiate. And in total, we had about 300 or more attendees over the course of the two events. We also engaged TDSB school, so Islington Junior Middle School, in some initial feedback with students. It's really important to understand their priorities and see how they would like to see the future of the street look. We had about 76 respondents from their online feedback form, which is the same online feedback form that hopefully a few of you were able to fill out as well. So this was the feedback form we were encouraging all attendees of the public drop-in events, all receivers of that notification I spoke to before, to fill out. And in total, we got almost 1,900 responses that were all analyzed afterwards when we were refining the design, different comments that we needed to speak to, and different issues that we needed to address throughout the project. Same thing goes with emails and phone calls. We had about 120 emails and 15 phone calls over the course of the consultation process. However, to date, so that includes during installation, after installation, and I think even as close as last week, we have over 763 emails and phone calls, including those received in the consultation process. At present, and we do closely monitor our email inbox as well as the phone line. And I just wanted to also mention that the project team continues to work closely with both Councillor's office, so both Councillor Morley's team hosting this event, as well as Councillor Perks, to receive, track, and respond to feedback. And our general process works that we review the email or phone call, answer any questions that may come in, as well as assess the feasibility of the request and or adjustment of the installation and monitoring plan, and then communicate this back to the residents or the businesses. Again, we appreciate your patience in all of this, as there has been a large volume of emails and phone calls that have come in. And lastly, based on those feedback suggestions and the questions received, the project team updates the information materials accordingly. So that's the webpage that I believe Adam spoke to as well.
Fantastic.
I'll also speak briefly about how feedback shapes the project. And so we received feedback both during the consultation phase, and we looked at additional right turn on red restrictions that became part of the project, certain details associated with Mossam Road, commercial loading space in the Kingsway, as just a few examples. We also received feedback as part and during the installation and since installation, again, adding loading zones, widening the parking laybys where they were installed narrower than designed, signage adjustments, and a variety of other pieces of feedback we got from you and from some of the other interest groups. So keep those coming. They help us understand what's working and not working for you. And so we make adjustments accordingly.
Great. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Alyssa. And again, just wanting to highlight, the really in-depth engagement of this team and this community around this project, and wanting to thank staff for joining us for a site visit just not too long ago, which probably was highlighted, but I missed it running back and forth to computers. So sorry about that. But again, we are absolutely consistently listening and working together towards improvement. I feel like if you counted up all of the calls and emails from my office alone, that feedback number would skyrocket as well. So thank you, Alyssa, for taking us through the high volume of communications you all are navigating on this. So this one's an important one, of course, for our residents, and it's specific to emergency services. Can you speak to how they were consulted on the design? Are they satisfied with the design? How do we work collaboratively with our emergency service offices? And can they be accommodated in the complete streets as it is currently laid out along Bloor?
Yeah, thanks for that and great questions. We work closely with emergency services. On the next slide, I'll walk you through a couple of ways that we do so. So on the left, you see sort of a general big picture. So what they do is an analysis of the previous extension that I mentioned from Shaw Street to Runnymede Road, as well as both phases of this project. And they looked to compare to other neighborhoods and other areas. Would there be or has there been, in the case of the previously installed segment, significant travel or response time difference along Bloor than other areas? And what they found is that there was no significant impacts as a result of the previous project. And the same is true with this extension. So they predict that They will also not likely see a significant impact in total response times as a result of the project. So they're a partner in data collection and data reporting, and they will continue to be a partner in that way as we report on this and other projects in our portfolio. At the specific level, very granularly, we look and circulate to them every intersection, every route, every design choice. We run what's called auto turn. It's a program that runs the design as well as their large vehicles like the aerial fire truck, which is their most common large truck, to ensure that we design it so that they can make the maneuvers that they need to make. So here's an example from that at Royal York. It shows that their trucks can make these turns. And we even sometimes set the curbs back even further. So if you look at the top left corner, this is the northwest corner, we could have brought curbs even closer to the intersection, but we set them back further. And this is exactly so that people can pull over in the case of an emergency. Along the Kingsway, you have that beautiful center median that the BIA maintains, and it adds such depth and a sense of place to the community. It also means that it's difficult for fire trucks to run in the reverse direction or cross the center line in the case of an emergency. And so setting back curbs in addition to what we normally would is an extra consideration.
Great. Glad to know that it's an ongoing piece of the monitoring and an ongoing conversation and collaboration. I know residents in my office are very keen to keep an eye on that piece. Thanks for that, Adam. So this next question is for me. What would it take to reverse the decision and change Bloor back to 4 lanes of traffic? So as some of you may know, this project was actually adopted by City Council before I took office back in 2021. The cycling network plan was approved by council at that time, and it did in fact include this particular extension of complete streets along Bloor West. It has since gone through a number of iterations that I have wholeheartedly supported, and I do continue to be in support of this project. As we heard here tonight, there are a lot of really important initiatives and priorities that we have as a city, and we will not arrive at those destinations if we do not put our money where our mouth is and take bold action to make it happen. So we have a growing community whose needs, need to absolutely be met. Safe, accessible streets for everyone is a priority for me as your councillor. We do need to continue to work actively to contribute to our climate goals through active transportation and ensuring that the safe infrastructure exists for people to make that choice. And then, of course, Transform TO, which is our climate action strategy, sets an ambitious goal for residents to walk, bike, or take transit for 75% of school and work trips under 5K by 2030. So it is an ambitious goal, but I do think that it is one that's keeping the wellness, well-being, and health of our communities in a sustainable way well into the future at the forefront. And so my commitment here today and has been throughout the process is not just to plop it in and walk away and move on to the other many things that keep us busy in this office, but to really be intentional about the process, about the engagement, and about the iteration along the way, so we can continue to work towards this project working well for our local businesses who have been deeply impacted, and we hear that, and of course for our local residents who deserve the best community that we can possibly build as a city for you. So that's where we stand. We will talk next steps in terms of our additional commitments to continuing to check in, to continuing to keep an eye on these monitoring activities, and to ensure that this particular project comes to fruition in the ways that all the positive benefits that we anticipate, come to life for the neighborhood and for those who are using it. I will also just flag, we hear a lot about people who are being challenged by this change, but we also hear a lot from people who are incredibly excited and feel really supported by this change. And so there are lots of voices on both sides of this issue, and my job, I believe, is to hold space for the conversation and to try to make it the best we can make it. So that's what we're going to continue to do. So we're going to move into the next question, and I am mindful of time, folks. We are just 1 minute after 8. I think we might go to about 5 or max 10 minutes after time. So just thanks in advance for that. If you're still with us, we appreciate you. We appreciate your engagement, and we've just got 3 more questions to work through before we jump into the next steps. So. To the team, how does this project improve safety for vulnerable road users, and how can that be measured?
I'll invite Jacqueline Hayward to respond to this question.
Thanks, Adam. As we've been talking about throughout the presentation, speed is a significant factor in improving safety for vulnerable road users across our city, as is dedicated space for people who are choosing to cycle and have the space for additional safe crossings along the roads that intersect with Bloor Street. So those are some of the significant ways that this project is intended to improve safety. It's being measured by looking at the past collision data and looking at the collision types that are typical along both Bloor Street specifically, as well as streets like Bloor Street, and then implementing measures that are known through our industry to improve safety. So things like the leading pedestrian intervals, so that head start signal for pedestrians that will also be improved for people on bikes, as well as the phasing at certain signalized intersections where there are conflicts that could be prevented by having phased cycles separate for people on bikes versus in cars. Those are some of the key ways. Adam also described a number of the intersection treatments to slow down turns at intersecting streets, and that's another significant way. Measuring that will take time. We'll look at the collision trends as we go forward over the next couple of years. And we do look at near miss collisions at some locations where we've implemented these types of changes before, to be able to see that we know that changing the curb radii at key intersections will improve the safety of turning vehicles, not having the opportunity for collision with pedestrians crossing. So those are some of the ways that we can measure safety, and it's really important to continue to see the progress that the city has made in getting closer to the vision of zero pedestrians and cyclists being killed or seriously injured on our streets, which is obviously a very it's a stretch goal, but it's an important one, because not a single person dying or being seriously injured on our streets should be acceptable to our city.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jacqueline. I really appreciate that answer and the additional color around it. I think we all need to have ambitious goals, even if we can't deliver on them for ourselves in this generation. You know, it's about setting ourselves up for success as we move forward, and for future generations as well. Not that it's going to take that long, guys, for us to see positive benefits here, but just I think an important point. So moving into the next question, it's our second last one, and again, a really important one, specifically for patrons who love Bloor Street, who love our small businesses on Bloor Street, who frequent the BAA regularly. How can we improve access and safety for drivers exiting their vehicles after parking? So that's one piece of it. And additionally, for folks who are maybe getting dropped off along Bloor to patronize some of the local businesses and services along that strip.
Yeah, thank you for that question, everyone. I'll speak about it briefly, enough to say that it's something that we're looking at. We've definitely heard this feedback from you directly and through the councillor's office, so thank you for that. On the left side, you see an image of the parking laybys or former laybys that are now where the cycle track is, and the parking and the curbs and the bollards are installed on the sidewalk side. And then in the Kingsway, we've installed it on the other side. I won't get into the minutia of the detail of, you know, how we look at all the contexts, but just enough to say that we're looking at this so that we can make sure that the safety of all road users, including people getting in and out of their vehicles or getting picked up and dropped off, can do so and feel safe. So mostly thank you for your feedback, and you'll be hearing more on this in the future.
Thanks, Adam. It's a really important one, I know, for so many people, myself included, that we really worked to get that one really figured out. So this one was sort of a general number of additional questions. Again, we can't get to them all tonight, but we do look forward to continuing to receive them and to discuss them internally, staff to staff, as we work to continue to make this project the best that it can be. But this is sort of bringing up some other questions related to CafeTO, pavement markings, right turns, winter clearing, and more. So can you talk to us briefly about the plan for CafeTO? How many patios will there be this year? And what do the new pavement markings mean? How can we safely turn right? And then finally, of course, how are bike lanes cleared during the winter months? We want to, of course, see an uptick in the use of this important infrastructure, and of course, wanting to ensure that there's a plan to make sure it's accessible. Over to you, Adam.
Thanks. I mean, I'll speak quickly about maintenance. With pavement markings, it really depends on which ones you're talking about, but we want to make the street feel safe and be safe. And so that's our laser focus. If you have specific questions about a particular intervention, design, feel free to take a snip from the website where we've released all the plans in PDF, send it to us by email, or take a photograph and say, hey, why is this like this? And we'll be able to explain it to you. From a CafeTO perspective, it's a process. We worked with the cafes that were previously on Bloor in this segment, and to make sure that as this project was installed after their cafes came out, we'll do the same thing this year. So as they apply for permits, they'll work with the CafeTO team. We'll collaborate with them and make sure that as many cafes as are feasible can be installed throughout this corridor. So just broadly speaking, we build bikeways, we maintain the bikeways, and City Council supports that. So when more than 2 centimeters of snow falls, the bikeways are plowed separately. And you can look at Plow.to for up to the minute plow locations if you're looking for exactly where the plows are, both for bikes and for the rest of the roadway.
And back to those sunny summer patios for a second to give you an idea on the timelines. The permit application process is actually open right now. Renewals are currently being applied for, and new permits until March 1st. So restaurants and bars have the opportunity to apply in that time, and then they'll be getting in their details around their platform designs. And we're hoping to have 90% of the CafeTO locations open in curb lanes for the Victoria Day weekend.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jacqueline and Adam. I really appreciate that. So what's next? My team and I obviously continue to work really hard on this issue. We want to get it right. And we need you all to continue to engage with us and this team in order for us to arrive at that destination. So we'll be hosting a second information session, hopefully reporting back on some of the pieces that we covered tonight and giving more in-depth detail and being able to share at that time. So that'll be an evening and on April 4th, again on WebEx. It'll be virtual. So do keep posted if you're not already receiving our newsletter that goes out bi-weekly. We really try to make them informational and useful for residents. So feel free to subscribe. We'll also be hosting a town hall in person on October 16th. So it's quite a ways away. We're going to hopefully have a beautiful summer season between now and then. But do save the date and we will happily be in touch with more details, including a confirmed location soon as we have it. So we are looking forward to this ongoing discussion. In the fall, we'll have all the data collected and analyzed, and we'll be able to really have a super informed discussion at that time, as well as looking at some of the improvements that are going to happen between now and then. And I'll just pass it back off to Adam one last time for next steps on your end.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I'll be very brief. Thank you for coming tonight, everyone. Just so you know, if you go to toronto.ca/Bloor West, we have a very in-depth website. I was hoping to take you through a quick tour of that, but it is a standard website, self-explanatory, a lot of drop-down menus. There are new responses to questions, frequently asked questions that we've received. Some of the content that I've shared with you tonight is there in more detail. So if you have questions, we encourage you to visit there. We'll also be sending out more mailers, one for the phase 2 installation notice, as well as an information flyer about the project more generally, and how to operate as, you know, pedestrians, people cycling, drivers in the new environment. So that'll come out in the spring as well. All the data will be released on the public website. So we love to hear from you. We want to hear from you. It's probably best if you send us an email. We're also available by phone. If you have general maintenance questions like a traffic signal's not working or potholes, go to 311 rather than using these methods. We do want to hear about what's working for you, what's not. And then if you still have questions after reviewing the website content, please contact us. We do really want to engage with you directly and through the counselor's office as well. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Adam, to yourself, Alyssa, Jacqueline. We appreciate your expertise and your leadership and guidance as we navigate this big change for our neighborhood, but I think an important one and hopefully significantly beneficial as we continue to move through the process. So with that, and with a massive thank you to my team, Samantha, Tanisha, well, Sam, we call her Sam, Tanisha, Ussi, and Lisa, thank you all for the great work organizing and keeping us on point here tonight. We look forward to seeing you guys all again at our next session in April. And similar to Adam, we're always here to help. Happy to hear from you. Please do reach out as you feel called, and we look forward to the ongoing discussion. Thank you guys for sticking around for a couple of extra minutes, and wishing everybody a wonderful evening and a wonderful week ahead. Take good care, everybody. Bye-bye.